Can you hear me now? Good. Can you hear me now?
How do you build America's largest wireless network?
Can you hear me now? Good.
By never being satisfied.
Can you hear me now? Good.
Until no matter where you go.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Your call goes through.
Can you hear me now? Good.
Verizon Wireless. We never stop working for you.
Every day, I wake up determined to deliver a better life for the people all across this nation that have been ignored, neglected, and abandoned. I have visited the laid-off factory workers and the communities crushed by our horrible and unfair trade deals. These are the forgotten men and women of our country, and they are forgotten, but they're not going to be forgotten long. These are people who work hard, but no longer have a voice. I am your voice.
I am She-Ra.
Didn't you get my text?
What you mean, a string of nonsensical emojis? Fire, sword, donut, spaceman, clock, dancing lady, flashlight, thumbs up. How am I supposed to know what that means?
I ignited the flaming sword, used it to cut a hole in space and time. Mum's light flooded through it, then it closed up behind her. All good.
It is my esteemed pleasure to introduce Mr. and Mrs. Donald Trump. It's the Donald! Oh my God!
Mr. and Mrs. Trump, it's an honor to meet you.
Are all your employees in?
Good.
Now he means business. Verizon Wireless. We never stop working for you.
I'm on the face of the 7, not you. Me. I still score higher every demo that counts. 18 to 34, 18 to 49, 25 to 54. They all love me.
Oh, congratulations. I mean, this constant need to be loved by everyone is kind of pathetic, but...
It's war. New York City's first socialist mayor took aim at President Trump minutes after his historic victory.
Donald Trump, since I know you're watching, I have 4 words for you. Turn the volume up.
Can you hear me now? Good. Can you hear me now?
How do you build America's largest wireless network?
Can you hear me now? Good.
By never being satisfied.
Can you hear me now? Good.
Until no matter where you...
How many churches have pastors that get in trouble for being pedophiles? But why do they never ever get in trouble? Do you know who else can get away with that stuff? Masons. And you can't tell me that the world loves the church or that they love Christianity or that they're partial to Christianity, because we know that the world isn't like that. They're getting away with it because the cops, the legal systems, everybody who's anybody is a Mason. And most of these churches are connected to Masonry. He Came to Set the Captives Free is a book by Dr. Rebecca Brown. She used to be a high priest in the Satanic cult, and she came out of it and became very Christian. She wrote a book about her experiences. One thing that she talked pretty heavily about was that on Saturday nights, they'd be in the cult doing horrendous things. And then Sunday morning, they would all scatter to the local churches, and they were pastors, CCD teachers, nuns, all different positions in the churches, just for the laugh of it and to corrupt the churches. This is, of course, not everybody, but...
I'm about to expose something real quick because I need y'all to pay attention. If y'all don't pay attention to this, you're not going to get it. Do y'all see this First Baptist Church right here, right? In this big old building, this recreation gym, and they have this church office in this Mac gym, right? I'm going to show y'all what's behind this church. Hold on. Yep. Just as expected.
Let's just keep it real and use basic logic. How many churches have pastors that get in trouble for being pedophiles? But why do they never ever get in trouble? Do you know who else can get away with that stuff? Masons. And you can't tell me that the world loves the church or that they love Christianity or that they're partial.
So why can't we just solve this right here? Give me a good enough reason on what's a security risk for me. You know who I am. My name is Sean Paul Reyes. He came out and said, "Hi, Mr. Reyes." So you can't use the excuse of an unknown man parking in front of the Connecticut State Police. You know who I am. I'm recording. I have a photographer with me. I have a news outlet with me. And this is going to be for everybody to see. The Connecticut State Police violating my rights for what? I'm not going inside. I don't want to talk to Sergeant Brian Fagan.
This is how to make gasoline if World War III destroys everything. Because gasoline is the bloodline of survival. It runs your engine, giving you freedom to move, and it powers your generator for electricity. Here's what you need: old plastic waste, a metal container, a smaller container, a metal pipe, and fire. Start by collecting your plastic waste, things like shampoo bottles and plastic bags. Avoid PVC and polystyrene. They release toxic gas and will absolutely ruin your day. Now cut your plastic into small pieces and put them into your metal container, then seal it tight. That's your pyrolysis chamber. Now drill a hole in the lid and attach a metal pipe. This will carry the vapor out. Connect that pipe to another container sitting in cold water. That's your condenser, where vapor...
Be better.
She called the police to help her with a family disturbance, and the police killed her family.
Yolanda Ramirez's sister Sylvia says Yolanda said she was there to pick up her brother Ruben for a medical appointment, but Sylvia says Ruben didn't have a medical appointment and she didn't want him to leave with Yolanda. She says Yolanda was kicking and pounding on the door, so she called police. When Yolanda walked over to the driver's side of her vehicle, the officer called out to Officer Peachman that she was fleeing.
No, she was.
Here's an ex-witch that's talking about things that are actually demonic. Watch this.
Things that are actually demonic from an ex-witch. I see a lot of scaremongering going on in Christianity about so many things being demonic that, in my opinion, really are not. So, as always, from my perspective, my opinion, and my life, I'm going to tell you exactly what led me into witchcraft and what you need to stay away from. And believe me, some of these things you'd have no idea about. Absolutely anything that tries to tell your future. Anything, even if something as stupid as those little 8 balls. Me personally, I started really understanding my gift of future by using tools like playing cards and things like that. If you come across something that tries to tell you what your future is, that is not of God. And actually, it's on a mission to deter you from God's plan. Alcohol, the biggest one, without a doubt, alcohol. There is a demon named alcohol. This demon talks about the absence of the soul, removing the soul from the body, and then allowing a demon to inhabit the body. Every single time in my past that I had a drink, I would be spiritually attacked to the next level. And even my friends as well, you know, if you have a hangover, it's more than just a hangover, isn't it? You literally want to exit the... Alcohol is without a doubt one of the most demonic things on the planet. You could also argue that's why a lot of it is called spirit. Wine I feel slightly different about, obviously, is mentioned in the Bible quite a lot. Anything that leads you to intoxication or that you are not in control of your own body, demonic. This goes for a lot of medications as well. I'm not going to speak too deeply on that because, you know, free speech and all. Anything that makes you feel like you are not in control of your own body, demonic doorway. Forms of thought control, and you'll be surprised at this. Absolutely anything or anyone that tries to prevent you from thinking, asking questions, delving into things. People in charge at the moment, if you catch my drift. The process of cognitive thinking was God-given for a reason. Absolutely anything that tries to stop you thinking or having your own mindset is completely and utterly demonic. That's where cults come from. Gossip, without a doubt, gossip is one of the most demonic things on the planet. And it is all kick-started from a demon, and it grows and becomes gang stalking. Get yourself away from any kind of position of gossip. Obviously, tarot cards, witchcraft, spells, Ouija boards, massive. All of these things give a direct gateway to demons. Arguing and fighting, huge gateway. So when I say to you that something isn't demonic, I'm not saying that it's good. Pay attention to how something makes you feel. That is the core under everything. How does it make you feel?
She's speaking a lot of truth. Let me know what you think in the comments. Here's an ex-witch that's talking about things that are actually demonic. Watch this.
Things that are actually demonic from an ex-witch. I see a lot of scaremongering going on in Christianity about so many things being demonic that in my opinion really are not. So as always, from my perspective, my opinion and my life, I'm going to tell you exactly what led me into witchcraft and what you need to stay away from. And believe me, some of these things you'd have no idea about. Absolutely anything that tries to tell your future. Anything, even if something as stupid as those little 8 balls. Me personally, I started really understanding my gift of future by using tools like playing cards and things like that. If you come across something that tries to tell you what your future is, that is not of God. And actually, it's on a mission to deter you from God's plan. Alcohol, the biggest one, without a doubt, alcohol. There is a demon.
They always tell you what they're going to do before they do it, folks. What is the deep state next moves? Well, look at all the Epstein files coming out on Trump. The emails trying to incriminate Trump. Obviously, they're trying to flood him and drown him with that. And Gavin Newsom is now touted as the climate president. Gee, why would that be? Maybe some kind of natural disaster or climate catastrophe's coming, and he's going to take the helm of the ship and say, see, I was right. I'm the climate president. Telling you, folks, this is what they're doing. They always tell you what they're going to do before they do it, folks. What is the deep state next moves? Well, look at all the Epstein files coming out on Trump, the emails.
I voted for Trump. I'm Catholic just like you. How should we deal with this issue of immigration, keeping in mind what God said about,
the hell? Time to
3 to 4 years, I have my life as a transgender. I know it's surprising, by the way, I look. And I took synthetic hormones for just I came witness to an object was because for 3 to 4 years, I have my life as a transgender. I know it's surprising, by the way, I look. And I took synthetic hormones for just over a year. And when I came witness to an object was because for 3 to 4 years, I have my life as a transgender. I know it's surprising, by the way, I look. And I took synthetic hormones for just over a year. And when I came witness to an object was because for 3 to 4 years, I have my life as a transgender. I know it's surprising, by the way, I look. And I took synthetic hormones for just over a year. And when I came witness to an object was because for 3 to 4 years.
Hey, fans of Ray Charles out there, any Ray Charles fans?
Yeah, I don't know who Ray Charles. Ray Charles, who's that?
What about Stevie Wonder? You got any Stevie Wonder fans? Yeah. I think Ray Charles and Stevie Wonder are two of the greatest recording artists of all time.
Can you imagine such an unhinged lunatic like Sergeant Brian Fahey being in charge of whether somebody gets a pistol permit? Absolutely mind-blowing. This psycho is in charge of people getting their pistol permit. I'm told through my sources it's because Sergeant Brian Fahey is inside the Connecticut State Police headquarters because he's a danger to society. He cannot be out on the street. It's proven right. This video proves he's an unhinged, thin blue line gang member. He has the tattoos to match. And he's a danger to society. And he's emailing people that are petitioning.
The CIA owns the news media. When they put out these BS stories, they write them up a certain way, just like 3 Days of the Condor with Robert Redford, where they put code words in the paragraphs to put out messages to their agents and certain people. So when I read stuff, I read it and I scan it. Does that make sense? And when I see certain buzzwords that stand out, that's an alert. Those are trigger words. Those are certain words.
They're like signaling each other.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Everything you see in the media is to be questioned.
Right.
The CIA owns the news media. When they put out these BS stories, they write them up a certain way, just like 3 Days of the Condor with Robert Redford, where they put code words in the paragraphs to put out messages to their agents and certain people. So when I read stuff, I read it and I scan it. Does that make sense? But when I see certain buzzwords that stand out, That's an alert. Those are trigger words. Those are certain words.
They're like signaling each other.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Everything you see in
You
the
think-
media is to be questioned.
Right.
The CIA owns the news media. When they put out these BS stories, they write them up a certain way, just like 3 Days of the Condor with Robert Redford, where they put.
Yeah, that's been documented. The CIA influences the news. Who is the CIA? CIA stands for Catholic Intelligence Agency.
I want you to watch this so you understand how the EBT scam
A lot
works.
of people are using EBT to buy food, which they put into plates and then they resell. They call it selling plates, and they buy the styrofoam separated thing. And some entrepreneurial hood types cook and sell plates. A Michigan baker refused a plea deal after allegedly misusing over $20,000 in SNAP benefits to fund her bakery.
Too many workarounds. When people get benefits, then they can't make a certain amount of money because it'll end their benefits. So they will always try to stay just under it and then find new ways to make money. Black market, creating little plates with your EBT money and selling them on the side, getting some tax-free money. This is all small game stuff that keeps people stuck at a lower position. So you're trying to help them, but in the end, you're hurting them because you got them stuck on this government cheese. Then they're selling the cheese, trading the cheese, and then you take away their cheese and they say, "Hey, who moved my cheese?" Great book.
Who moved my
I want you to watch
cheese?
this so you understand how the
Where'd my
EBT
cheese
scam
go?
People are using EBT to buy food, which they put into plates and then they resell. They call it selling.
The lieutenant on site. Okay. I don't have any
Yeah.
weapons on. Dude, we're not threat. You guys are legally carrying. I am not legally carrying.
You are
anything.
legally.
Thank you.
Legal
Yeah,
is not
it not carrying
lawful.
any- No, of course not. We were just walking up the sidewalk.
Oh, by the way, the threatening manner. That's the loophole that all the
walking
Florida
with the
sheriffs and law
gun. How do I
enforcement
walk
are going to
with
try
the
to use
threatening
against
manner
Floridians
unless
who actually
I'm
exercise
pointing
their
at
right to open carry.
somebody?
If they don't
Open
like you
carry
and they can
means
manipulate it,
attack
they're going to say you're
back.
carrying in a manner calculated to cause alarm and fear. That's what they're going to do. That's their disorderly for guns. That's their loophole. That's their
do that?
catch-all charge they're going to try to use
I
for
didn't
people who
do
they don't
nothing.
want to open carry.
Walking down the
Okay.
street.
I don't have any weapons on. Dude, we're not threat. You guys are legally carrying. I am not legally carrying anything. Recognize he's lawfully carrying. Thank you. Appears to be right. Yes.
I'm
It is not
lawfully
carrying any.
carrying.
No, of course not. We were just walking up the sidewalk.
Oh, by the way, the threatening manner. That's the loophole that all the Florida sheriffs and law enforcement are going to try to use against Floridians who actually exercise their right to open carry.
Floridians.
If they don't like you and they can manipulate it, they're going to say you're carrying in a manner calculated to cause alarm and fear. That's
what the hell
what they're
is
going to do. That's
Floridia?
I would personally like to
Floridia
see an
is
economy that does better as opposed to
God
worse. What do you
Okay.
think?
So here's what I'll say. Since you're
Uh-oh,
unwilling
Rob,
to
let's
tell
get
us
out of
that,
this.
I'll tell you a little.
I would say that the only correct.
I think I
And
gotta
right
go.
behind me, by the way, in about 2 years from now,
Okay,
we'll
here's
use a
some
much bigger room because we had to turn away a lot of people. And it'll
Holy
be right
cow.
here. This will be the entrance. That's the knockout
He's
tunnel.
making
It's called
a
the knockout. It looks
ballroom.
pretty nice right now. It's going to look a lot better in a little while. And
The
we're gonna go
king's
from this room
ballroom.
to
The
a room
king
where
is
there's A
naked.
few more people. And it's going to be beautiful.
We know who you are.
I just
Don't
noticed I happened
To be honest, the reason women sell sex.
sold out. Oh. Go. Recall.
I told homeboy to bring me a forklift. He brought me a
What? Oh my God.
I told homeboy to bring me a forklift. He brought me a
What?
I want you to just stop and think for just a second.
No, I don't want to think for a second.
That's a trap.
Okay. Let's think for a
I
second.
want you to just stop and think for just a second. Look at Revelation 13. It's the whole world that wanders after the beast. I want you to look at the biblical stories and ask yourself, when has the majority ever been in the right? The golden calf.
That's a trap. They're going to immediately grab your phone because you've unlocked it and search it. So I recently did a video on how the police were going to let you go home. They asked you to call
Don't
somebody
let 'em
to
have
take
your
you
phone.
home, and I did a video on what that means. One of my followers, Scooby Doo.
Do you think the 3-Eye Atlas is not only a real thing, but it's extraterrestrial? Gonna get reveal of ETs.
Yeah, so there is an extraterrestrial component.
Extraterrestrial.
A pair of armed robbers pointing guns at a helpless store clerk at this convenience store on the 4700 block.
Nothing
of South
new under
Oaks
the
near Tacoma
sun, I
Mall.
guess.
Employees here tell
Robberies,
Como the suspects got away with about
vandalism,
1,000.
punk ass
I personally have
bitches.
dozens and dozens of old newspaper clippings published with skeletons of unusual size, 10 feet tall and even more, were being dug up all across the United States. I have so many of those. In fact, it could be a book all by itself. And these articles lend support to the legends of
Not
when the
dinosaurs,
vicious
but
giants
giant
were
human
worldwide. While David was fighting
human
them
bones.
on one side of the world, it appears the Anasazi may have been built.
This is a powerful illustration of saying I'm sorry, but it means nothing when the heart.
Southwest 3 maintains the separation. That traffic. Maintain separation. Southwest 1383 helicopter now 2 o'clock, 2 miles. They have you in sight. We'll maintain separation.
Copy, thanks. We're still searching Southwest 1333.
Southwest area, we'll just pass behind that traffic.
Sir, it'd be better if we go above it and in front of it if we can.
Roger.
Helicopter, just go
We're
above it.
deviating right for this traffic.
Okay, Roger, would you like only 6 right?
Negative. We can come back. We're gonna execute. Go around. We got an R8.
Southwest 13 right there. Roger, 1 able, fly heading 060.
Go around. Why?
060 Southwest 1333.
Southwest 3 maintains the separation. That traffic.
Do that when a plane.
Manipulative.
If you got a
maintains the separation. That traffic.
if you got a helicopter above you when you're landing, it's got down thrust. It will fuck your landing up. So he made this pilot do a go around because right over it.
Helicopter now 2 o'clock, 2 miles. They have you in sight. We'll maintain separation.
Copy, thanks. We're still searching Southwest 1333.
Southwest area, we'll just pass behind that traffic.
Sir, it'd be better if we go above it and in front of it if we can.
Roger.
Stupid fucking
We're
military.
deviating right for this traffic.
Bad men.
People living on this Everett Street are shocked over the alleged murder of their landlord, Daniel Litton, and now a neighbor.
Is anybody watching in the stream? Because if nobody's watching, then I guess I'm just talking to myself like everybody else does on these streams. You know what I mean? I just see, where am I? Trying to, okay.
Has been named as the suspect.
It's a terrible situation, regardless of what the truth is.
Damn white boomer. It looks like a white boomer. All the white boomers are serial killers.
James Burr and others watched the first court appearance for suspect David Lee Kraft, one of Litton's tenants.
Do you find the facts are sufficient to support probable cause to the charge?
Russ Harris worked for Litton for nearly a decade, most recently remodeling this rental property. You said you were one of the last people to see him.
Yes.
Lord.
He was a good person for the community, and all those tenants really, it's a real shock to all those tenants.
This police report states Kraft contacted Litton about fixing a toilet issue.
No, can't trust you. Okay, this is Kennington. The Apocalypse in Kennington, near Philadelphia. Brotherly love. Brotherly love is getting out of control. Put those motherfuckers in a insane asylum or something. Car hit ICE vehicle. Oh my God, you hit the ICE vehicle. Well, he's just trying to get away. He doesn't want to go to fucking Africa. He doesn't want to go back to China. Like that. I want to get the hell out of here. I like it here better. No. You gotta go.
We're not going to be using phones anymore, and how phones are going to be like a thing of the past.
Well, I can tell you where I think things are going to go,
not gonna use
which is
phone.
that we're not going to have a phone or in the traditional sense. You get everything through AI.
Everything through AI. What will be the benefit of that? What kind of time frame are we talking about here?
5 or 6 years, something like that.
Our current economy is based upon people just searching and scrolling and doom scrolling on social media and stuff.
Yeah.
People don't know
buy
what
Amazon.
they want. So that's how a lot of sales actually happen, is like through FOMO, or something catches their eye while they're scrolling on social media. It's a panic buy, like consumerism.
Everybody
you make people buy things that they don't actually need. Now, what Elon is kind of describing is that's no longer going to be a thing.
Besides, half the fun of the internet is bouncing around. I'm a Mason. Amazon.
His son was dead for over 4 hours, and then
4
this happened.
hours.
My oldest son called and he said, "Dad, I'm sorry to tell you this, but Peter, my youngest son, he said he's dead." I said, "What happened?" And he told me what happened. And I said, "Don't you let anybody touch him until we get there." And so Jamie and I had to get up. We had to get dressed. It was an hour drive into Colorado Springs, and we didn't have cell phones. This was March the 4th, 2001. And so we got ready and praised God for the word. We knew that death and life is in the power of the words. And so we refused to speak any of our doubts. We spoke and agreed and said the first report is not the last report. That's the first thing that popped into my mind. So I just started resisting it. And out of nothing but faith, I just was saying, in the name of Jesus, I refused to grieve. And I started just praising God in an effort to counter all the negative stuff that I was feeling. And as soon as I did, when you start praising God, the Bible says that strength to still the enemy and the avenger. And I just started praising God. And when I did, prophecies started coming back to my remembrance. And there was 2 instances where people who never knew me came up to me and said, "You got 2 boys, and the younger is going to turn to the Lord before the older one does." And these were people that didn't even know me. I knew it was ordained of God, and they prophesied exactly what I needed to hear. And those prophecies hadn't come to pass. And it just finally dawned on my lightning fast mind that if those prophecies were really from God, then he had to live. All of a sudden, I saw it. Those prophecies helped me to focus, and I started laughing. And I told Jamie, I said, "This could be the greatest miracle we've ever seen." I'm not sure what Jamie thought about me. I know she was standing in agreement, but I saw it. And I said, "It's going to be awesome." And when we finally got into Colorado Springs, my oldest son came out and he said, "I don't know what happened, but 5 or 10 minutes after we called you, Peter just sat up and started talking." And when my oldest son called, he had been dead over 4 hours. He was already stripped naked. He was a white boy. He turned black, and he had a toe tag on, stripped naked on a cooler in a morgue. And he had already been pronounced dead and put in a morgue. And he just sat up and started talking between 4 and 5 hours with no oxygen to the brain. And he came back with no brain damage. Jesus said that when you are facing a problem, you speak to the mountain. Don't talk to God about your mountain. Don't tell God that the doctor says I'm dying. Would you do something? He told you to speak to your mountain. You speak to cancer. You speak to whatever. You take your authority. And somebody says, "But I'm not the source. I can't heal anybody." Absolutely. But you've got the source living on the inside of you, and it's at your disposal.
That's so powerful. If your faith won't move your mouth, it won't move your mountain. Follow for more.
Amen.
His son was.
So there she is right there. She's literally 5 foot tall, not even.
The lounge was hosting a Halloween fundraiser.
So then they throw her on the ground. He sticks his elbow in her ear. She looks like somebody's mother to me.
When Terrace RCMP officers appeared and were captured on camera restraining an elderly Indigenous woman using shocking levels of force without apparent reason.
This woman's in her 60s, maybe 70s. Putting your elbow in her ear to push her head to the ground is wrong. Sticking your knee in her face is wrong. I don't know what the hell's wrong with these people. So there she is right there. She's literally 5 foot tall, not even.
The lounge was hosting a Halloween fundraiser.
So
once you realize that, you can say, "Well, wait a second, we don't have a contract because I don't consider anything that you guys."
This is a tall carved stone, and it's a celebration. What is it celebrating? It's celebrating Assyrian conquests.
Celebrating
closely at these carvings,
crossing of
you're
the
going to
Red
see
Sea.
King Jehu of Israel. It's possible it's a representative of his, but it's more likely to be King Jehu himself. There's a figure bowing here. That's King Jehu of Israel. He is mentioned in 2 Kings chapter 10, verse 34. This Assyrian monument virtually confirms a biblical event. It's like the Bible's own photo album. The inscription itself reads, "Tribute of Jehu, son of Omri," who's also a king mentioned in the Bible as part of northern Israel after the split. He was pretty prominent. This is the only known depiction of an Israelite king from antiquity. That's right. You got a king from the Bible immortalized in this Assyrian monument. So this artifact, the black obelisk of Shalmaneser III, bridges the biblical narrative with historical records, reinforcing the Bible's accuracy. It's not mythology, it's not metaphor, history etched in stone. This is a tall carved.
3 spikes. Oh. Okay. I'm the only one watching. I don't care. I'm just watching some stuff. Make a knife out of that. Amen.
The BBC has apologized to Donald Trump for the editing of the Donald Trump speech in that Panorama documentary. They have, however, rejected Donald Trump's demands for compensation. So the BBC has rejected Donald Trump's legal team's demands for compensation. And we now have a sense of why they have done that. So why the apology on the one hand, but also the rejection of demands for compensation. Because I'll read that last line again, quote, "While the BBC sincerely regrets the manner in which the video clip was edited, we strongly disagree there is a basis for a defamation claim." The BBC has apologized to Donald Trump for the editing of the Donald Trump speech in that Panorama documentary. They have, however, rejected Donald Trump's demands for compensation. So the BBC has rejected Donald Trump's legal
fraud from things they don't tell us, like the definition of the word driver, right? You have an automobile as a passenger vehicle that does not transport persons for hire. It only benefits them. And you can just get rid of it and fight them and sue them. And there's no chance that they can win. Fraud from things they don't tell us, like the
Hello, Seattle. I am so happy to be here on this quintessentially Seattle day, a rainy day in November, to say to all of the people of Seattle, this is your city. And I am delighted, beyond delighted, to be your next mayor. It is an honor and a privilege, and I will do my very best.
The year is 2025, but it doesn't really matter if you're watching this in 2025, 21, 25, any year in between. The point I'm trying to make is this.
Maybe
we have
13,
smartphones, we have AI, we have quantum computers, we've mapped the human genome. We are manipulating the human genome. Humanity has claimed victory over nature itself. And yet, despite all of that, billions of people, billions, still believe in Jesus Christ. Why?
Exactly. Because
the year it's 2025, but
you're not running, you're walking with pace.
Walking like a New Yorker. Yeah, my New York stride.
You're being inconspicuous. It's not like you're
because I mean the line's literally, the boys are here. Do I see what she's looking at? Do I see that she's looking at? Or we like technically running out.
You're not running, you're walking with pace.
Walking like a New Yorker. Yeah, my New York stride.
You're being inconspicuous. It's not like you're
because I mean the line's literally, the boys are here. Do I see what she's looking at? Do I see that she's looking at?
Then you go get it. Martha, don't play.
Or we like technically running out.
Oh, this is part of the.
Running, you're walking with pace.
Walking like a New Yorker. Yeah, my New York stride.
I, of course, want to thank all of you for being here with me today.
Oh, Mayor of Seattle.
I just spoke with Mayor-elect Katie Wilson to congratulate her on a hard.
If you're trying to figure out where you ought to place your solar panels on your property, check out this app. The app is called Sun Path. Open it up here and you just hold it right up there to the sky and you can see where the sun is going to be at different times of the year. The red there is the summer, The yellow is today, and the blue is the winter solstice. Look at that, man. Right there along the trees. And today it's already down. It's called Sun Path. Open it up here and you just hold it right up there to the sky, and you can see where the sun is going to be at different times of the year. The red there is the summer, the yellow is today, and the blue is the winter solstice. Look at that, man. Right there along the trees. And today it's already down. It's only 3:22 and it's already getting dark. Now, when you know where the sun is going to be in the winter,
You have an automobile as a passenger vehicle that does not transport persons for hire. This includes station wagon.
Fires toasters. Fire. Salsa. Every Orthodox Christian is commanded by a heretical bishop before he is officially or be guilty also of his. What? Let's see that again. Wish I could blow this. How do you blow this shit up? I don't know. Orthodox.
You're wrong.
What the hell is this all about anyway? Guy flirting with the girls. Uh-oh. Not his wife.
I
Oh
don't know how
well.
many times I gotta say this, but this is something I truly live by. If you do not have children, you should not be dating anybody that has kids. Simple, just like that. Like, put yourself first. Love yourself first. I don't know how good of a
Each year, more than 15,000 young people age out of the foster care system, and unfortunately, too many struggle to become self-sufficient. The order I will sign in a few moments will provide vital new resources to help young people transition out of the foster care system and live a very happy and a very successful life. Very, very successful. Under this major new initiative, great American companies and institutions will be signing a pledge to invest in teaching, training, and mentoring America's youth who are transitioning out of the foster care system. This will help provide jobs, education, and personal development opportunities to fantastic young people who truly need and deserve them, and they're going to get them. Each year, more than...
Do you think they've caught your husband's killer?
Oh my gosh.
So-
He's thinking what? I don't want to hear it.
How awful is it to travel by airline right now? I booked a same-day round-trip ticket from Los Angeles to Las Vegas to find out. Very worried about making my flight, I showed up like your dad 4 hours early. The first thing that jumped out was, and I am not exaggerating this, LAX might be the emptiest I've ever seen it. I went to multiple terminals. Maybe people have been scared away from all the constant headlines. LAX is the 5th busiest airport in the nation. There were barely any delays or cancellations across the board. There was also nobody at check-in. I timed it. TSA had no line. I also timed it. The longest part of this entire journey was ordering my lunch. I know people who've had travel nightmares from this same airport last weekend, but it looked like for me, my flight was delayed less than 15 minutes. I arrived in Vegas, took a taxi to the Strip, had a pint, played 2 hands of blackjack and lost, and went back to Harry Reid International Airport. Again, completely empty, no flight delays, no sign of any strife. On my flight back to LA, I talked to my flight attendant, how's it been during this entire ordeal? And it wasn't noticeable to them. They mentioned that once this week, they had a 3-hour delay. It was like, delay in a week, isn't that normal? And they're like, yes. I think this is what is important here. Sometimes when you're going through a crisis, what you're seeing online is the 1% of the worst that is going on. You're not seeing.
Al disminuir la presión, el isobutano también baja de temperatura y se evapora de golpe, enfriando el tubo por el que pasa. Este tubo, normalmente de cobre por su excelente conductividad térmica, actúa como evaporador. Si hacemos pasar aire a través de él con un ventilador, ese aire se enfría instantáneamente. Pero el ciclo no termina ahí. Una vez evaporado, el gas necesita volver a convertirse en líquido para repetir el proceso. Y para eso entra en juego la bomba, que simula el papel de un compresor. Recoge el gas a baja presión. Al disminuir la presión, el isobutano también baja de temperatura y se evapora de golpe, enfriando el tubo por el que pasa. Este tubo, normalmente de cobre por su excelente conductividad térmica, actúa como evaporador. Si hacemos pasar aire a través de él con un ventilador, ese aire se enfría instantáneamente. Pero el ciclo no termina ahí. Una vez evaporado, el gas necesita volver a convertirse en líquido para repetir el proceso. Y para eso entra en juego la bomba, que simula el papel de un compresor. Recoge el gas a baja presión y lo comprime, aumentando su temperatura. Luego, al pasar por otra sección del circuito, el gas cede ese calor al ambiente y se condensa. Al disminuir la presión, el isobutano también.
I'm going to Dallas. I'm thinking about getting into some old oil money while I'm there, but I don't know how to. Do you know how to do that? But either way, I've got stand-up shows in Dallas. If I can get there, a very confusing road system they have. I think it was designed by a drunk spaghetti artist. Every on-ramp merges with another on-ramp that doesn't necessarily take you where you want to go, but you will always end up where Dallas wants you to go. My favorite women's sport in Dallas, plastic surgery.
I easily make $10,000 a month on the internet just by posting my silly little videos. And then something happened.
Federal. This is the city.
Labor.
Mount Fuji's doing okay. It's 1 in the afternoon in Japan. Mount Fuji. Excellent. That's the drama deal. I don't want that. I want this. Raging Tomato. All in the family. My lunch break. We are in the last season. Demonic imitation and the Satanic Trinity. What? Silicon Valley, they are breaking the veil. How can they break the veil? It's already been broken, mother. Building a chain mulcher from scrap. A chain mulcher? Oh, that's interesting. Let's check this out. Chain mulcher.
just so it doesn't go up. Can I accept? Sit properly. And there. I'm gonna let that rest. Oh.
You gotta make me a chain mulcher. That's a big ass motor there. I got one of those motors I can use. We got everything. Oh yeah.
You must remember this is your style. I don't really want to be close to this.
Come on, let's use the motherfucker. I'm gonna make it. I need a chain. Multiple. I'm gonna get to the 55. Yeah, make me a chain mulcher. Congress on push to release the Epstein files. Sure. Trump bill to reopen government after longest shutdown. Texas veterans will lobby against federal THC ban. Texas veterans. Well, of course, veterans like to get stoned. Replace your roof with recycled tires. That's a pretty good idea right there.
Well, the roof itself, 8-inch long. In lieu of ripping out this entire fine personally, because I work by myself.
Shingle, which is why we're trying to figure out a way to stop all of these asphalt shingles from coming.
The shingles exactly where you need to nail each piece. As someone that's a very visual person, these whole indicators, we want to guarantee that there's nothing in terms of moisture that gets behind this shingle. Of course, when cutting directly on your membrane, you certainly don't want to cut into it, which I certainly would never trust myself doing, but these guys are the experts, and I never saw one individual cut into the membrane while they were cutting these shingles on this entire roof. As we make our way up, as for up our shingles at our valley rafter joint, we have another.
Come on,
our
really?
chimney is maneuvering its way down our roof.
They don't look like tires.
And once that's taken, actually, we will come to the point where we do have one piece of cap is going to stand the test of time with a 50-year warranty, and that's quite impressive for a roof. In full transparency, EuroShield was a sponsor of this week's video, but they didn't pay me to do this video whatsoever. They just provided free material in terms of the shingles themselves. That's it. Everything else was out of my pocket.
Excellent.
George Smith Patton Jr. died on December 21st, 1945, 12 days after a low-speed traffic accident in occupied Germany left him paralyzed from the neck down. He was 60 years old, one of America's most celebrated and controversial military commanders, and in the final months of his life, he had become something far more dangerous than a mere eccentric warrior. He had become a political liability, a loose cannon whose increasingly extreme statements about the war's outcome, about the Soviets, and most shockingly, about the Germans themselves, threatened to undermine America's entire post-war diplomatic strategy. The accident that killed Patton has fueled conspiracy theories for decades, but the real story is almost more disturbing than any conspiracy. It's the story of how a brilliant battlefield commander became so consumed by his hatred of communism and his admiration for German military culture that he essentially argued America had fought on the wrong side of the greatest conflict in human history. Patton's statement that "we fought the wrong enemy" has echoed through history, seized upon by revisionists, neo-Nazis, and conspiracy theorists as validation for their twisted worldviews. But understanding what Patton actually meant and why he said it requires examining the context of post-war Germany, the emerging Cold War tensions, and Patton's own complex psychology. This was not a man speaking carelessly or hyperbolically. Patton genuinely believed by the summer of 1945 that the United States had made a catastrophic strategic error by allying with the Soviet Union against Nazi Germany, and he advocated publicly and privately for immediate military action against the Soviets, even suggesting that the Wehrmacht should be rearmed to help America fight this new war. The transformation of Patton from celebrated warrior to controversial pariah began almost immediately after Germany's surrender in May 1945. As military governor of Bavaria, Patton was responsible for implementing denazification policies designed to remove former Nazi Party members from positions of authority and rebuild German society on democratic foundations. Patton found these policies not just impractical, but fundamentally wrong-headed. He saw the Nazi Party membership as largely irrelevant, comparing it to Democratic and Republican Party membership in America. In his view, most Germans had joined the Nazi Party for practical reasons of career advancement and social conformity, not from genuine ideological commitment. And the best administrators and technicians were often party members simply because party membership had been necessary for professional advancement under the Third Reich.
His statements to reporters shocked Washington and outraged the American public. Patton declared that the Nazi thing was just like a Democratic and Republican election fight, that most Nazi Party members were no more dangerous than American political party members, and that the focus on denazification was preventing the efficient reconstruction of Germany. He went further, expressing open admiration for German prisoners of war, describing them as the only decent people left in Germany, while characterizing displaced persons and concentration camp survivors with contempt bordering on hatred. His diary entries and private letters reveal even more extreme views, referring to Jewish survivors as lower than animals, and expressing disgust at having to deal with what he saw as racially inferior populations. These were not off-the-cuff remarks that Patton later regretted or walked back. They represented his genuine convictions, shaped by his aristocratic upbringing, his romantic warrior ethos, and his visceral hatred of communism. Patton had grown up in a wealthy California family, steeped in military tradition and Southern aristocratic values. His family venerated the Confederacy and military honor codes that emphasized hierarchy, martial valor, and racial stratification. Patton saw himself as a warrior poet in the classical tradition, claiming to have memories of past lives as a soldier in various historical armies. He read military history obsessively and viewed modern warfare
You're making
through
him
a lens
sound like
of
a crazy
timeless
dude.
martial virtues rather than political
right.
ideologies or moral frameworks.
Wrong.
From this perspective, the
We
Germans
were
were
on the
natural
wrong
allies, a
side.
militaristic people who shared Patton's values of discipline, order, and martial excellence.
Discipline.
The Soviets, by contrast, represented everything Patton despised: disorder, barbarism, egalitarianism, and the destruction of traditional hierarchies. Throughout the war, Patton had chafed at the alliance with the Soviet Union, viewing Soviet military methods as crude and Soviet soldiers as subhuman hordes, overwhelming German skill with sheer numbers.
When he toured the ruins of Germany and occupied territories in the summer of 1945, seeing Soviet-occupied zones and Soviet military behavior, his antipathy crystallized into something approaching obsession. The context of 1945 helps explain, though not excuse, how Patton arrived at his extreme positions. The Soviet Union had been transformed, in Western imagination, from gallant ally to potential threat with shocking speed. During the war, American propaganda had portrayed the Soviets as heroic defenders of civilization against Nazi barbarism, emphasizing Russian courage and suffering. But even before Germany's surrender, cracks were appearing in the alliance. Disputes over Poland's future government, Soviet behavior in occupied territories, and Stalin's refusal to allow free elections in Eastern Europe signaled that the post-war world would not be characterized by cooperation between the victorious Allies. By summer 1945, American intelligence was receiving disturbing reports about Soviet conduct in occupied Germany and Eastern Europe. Red Army soldiers had engaged in widespread looting, rape, and brutality against German civilians. Soviet occupation authorities were establishing communist governments and security apparatuses throughout their zone of control, making clear that Stalin intended to maintain tight grip on Eastern Europe. American diplomats like George Kennan were sending cables warning that Soviet ideology and interests made conflict inevitable, that cooperation with the Soviet Union was a dangerous illusion. The atomic bomb, successfully tested in July and used against Japan in August, added a new dimension to great power competition, raising the possibility that a window of opportunity existed for America to confront the Soviets while maintaining nuclear monopoly. Patton seized on this emerging consensus and took it to its logical, horrifying extreme. If the Soviets were the real enemy, if conflict with communism was inevitable, then why had America destroyed Germany, the strongest anti-communist power in Europe? Why had America killed millions of Germans, devastated cities, German military power, only to hand half of Europe to Stalin? From Patton's perspective, this was not just strategic error, but civilizational catastrophe. He believed that German military culture represented the best defense against Soviet expansion, that the Wehrmacht was a professional fighting force that shared Western values, despite the Nazi regime's crimes, and that America should have negotiated with Germany, allowed Germany to continue fighting the Soviets in the East while America focused on Japan, and preserved German power as a bulwark against communism. These views were not unique to Patton among military professionals, but most officers had the sense to keep such thoughts private or express them in carefully coded language.
Japs were
Patton lacked this
anti-communist
filter,
too.
or perhaps deliberately chose to speak provocatively. In September 1945, he gave a press conference that sealed his fate. Asked about denazification, he made his notorious comparison of Nazi party membership to American political parties. The resulting outcry was immediate and overwhelming. Newspapers across America condemned Patton's remarks. Veterans groups expressed outrage that a senior American general was minimizing Nazi crimes, while millions of American families were still mourning sons who had died fighting Germany. Political leaders demanded Patton's removal. Even his longtime supporter and friend, General Dwight Eisenhower, now Supreme Commander of Occupation Forces in Europe, concluded that Patton had to go. Eisenhower relieved Patton of command of 3rd Army and transferred him to command 15th Army, a paper organization tasked with compiling historical records of the war. This was a humiliating demotion, removing Patton from operational command and sidelining him who was bound up in being a warrior and combat leader. This was devastating. His diary entries from this period reveal a man spiraling into depression and paranoia, convinced that he was being persecuted for telling uncomfortable truths, that lesser men were destroying him because they couldn't match his martial genius or moral courage. But Patton didn't stop talking. If anything, his removal from command seemed to liberate him to speak even more recklessly. In private conversations and letters, he advocated for immediate war against the Soviet Union. He proposed rearming German prisoners of war and incorporating Wehrmacht units into American forces for a drive toward Moscow. He argued that America should use its atomic bomb monopoly before the Soviets could develop their own nuclear weapons, that a preemptive strike might be necessary to prevent Soviet domination of Europe. These were not just the raving and popularity in America, but political lead to Cold War competition without triggering actual military complicated and has been debated ever since. Certainly impose communist dictatorships throughout Eastern Europe, did engage in aggressive espionage and subversion in Western nations, did develop nuclear weapons and threaten Western security for decades. Military buildup, yet threat rhetoric. Fence, Roma, disabled persons, political. Germany had started a war of aggression that killed tens of millions across Europe. Nazi Germany represented a totalitarian ideology built on racial hierarchy and genocidal ambition that was antithetical to every value America claimed to defend. Patton's position wasn't that America should have negotiated peace with a flawed but reformable German government. He expressed admiration for Nazi Germany's martial culture, suggesting that the problem wasn't Nazi ideology, but rather that America had fought against Germany instead of alongside it. His comparison of Nazi Party membership to American political parties wasn't a nuanced observation about varying levels of culpability among Germans under dictatorship. It was a deliberate minimization of Nazi crimes, suggesting that Nazi Party membership was essentially meaningless, rather than representing complicity in industrial genocide. Occurred on December 9th. Car went days later from pulmonary embolism and congestion and in what appeared to be a routine traffic accident. When in 1945, presenting complicity in industrial genocide and aggressive war. The traffic accident that killed Patton occurred on December 9th, 1945, near Mannheim, Germany. Patton was riding in a staff car when an army truck turned into his vehicle in what appeared to be a routine traffic accident. Patton suffered severe neck injuries and was paralyzed. He died 12 days later from pulmonary embolism and congestive heart failure. Almost immediately, conspiracy theories emerged suggesting that Patton had been assassinated, either by Soviet agents who saw him as a dangerous enemy, or by American intelligence services who feared he would continue causing diplomatic problems. These theories have persisted, fueled by the dramatic timing of Patton's death, the mysterious circumstances of the accident, and the undeniable fact that many powerful people wanted Patton silenced.
His neck.
The evidence for assassination is circumstantial at best. The truck driver was never conclusively identified. Some witness accounts conflict with official reports, and the ambush. But traffic accidents regularly, suggesting someone could have planned an ambush. But traffic accidents were common in occupied Germany. Roads were crowded with military vehicles operated by often inexperienced drivers, and Patton's death was consistent with nation methods. Conspiracy theory, and rightly so. Nazi Germany in which German victory would have been preferable to Allied victory, regardless of subsequent problems with Soviet expansion. Yet Patton's position, and the broader question of whether America should have confronted the Soviet Union immediately after defeating Germany, represents more than just the ravings of a bigoted general. It reflected genuine strategic dilemmas facing American policymakers and highlighted deep tensions in American society about race, democracy, and America's role in world affairs. The fact that a celebrated American general could express such views, could find some support among fellow officers and conservative politicians, reveals how contested American values were, even at the moment of greatest military triumph. The Greatest Generation mythology that would later emerge, portraying World War II as straightforward moral crusade fought by united democratic nation against obvious evil, obscures the reality that even at the time, significant voices questioned the alliance with Soviet Union, expressed sympathy for aspects of fascist ideology, and viewed the war through lenses of racial hierarchy rather than democratic principles. Patton died before he could write his memoirs or further elaborate his post-war views. We're left with fragmentary evidence from diary entries, letters, press conferences, and recorded conversations. Some defenders argue that Patton's statements were tactical rather than ideological, that he was focused on military preparedness against Soviet threat rather than genuinely admiring Nazi Germany. This interpretation is difficult to sustain, given his recorded statements about Jews, his admiration for German military culture, and his casual dismissal of Nazi crimes. A more honest assessment recognizes Patton as a genuinely great tactical commander who was also a bigot, whose martial values were untempered by democratic principles or more.
Fucking Jews. You can't say Jews in America. Mm-hmm.
Hey guys, I'm going to do a video today and we're going to look at early Christian history. The first look at this through the lens of so and is Daniel accurate with Nicene. That's what our history tells us. So just others writing. So just let that sink in and of itself that, our history tells us this occurred, almost 2,000 years ago or so. We have all of these volumes of books on different early church fathers and their writings. Just look at this compared to the Holy Bible. And, how much of this is true? We have 10 volumes of the ante-Nicene church fathers and then 18 volumes of the post-Nicene church fathers. And where do you even begin? We can read the Bible in a few months. And it's not that hard to do. A yearly Bible study plan is very easily obtained. But it would take years and years to read all of these volumes of the early church fathers. And how accurate are they? And how truthful are they? What's been added? What's been taken away? What's been misrepresented? And it reminds me, these early church fathers, and I've made a couple of videos about them already and their editors, and I'll briefly, refresh the memory of that. But it reminds me of Edward Gibbon here, a Freemason who published The History of the Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire in 1776. And he put out 10 volumes on the Roman Empire and its rise and its fall. But this 10-volume set of information that Edward Gibbon published in the late 18th century was taken from what few relevant records were available of Roman moralists of the 4th and 5th centuries. If you look at the sources that are cited by Gibbon, it is minimal. There's no way that you could get 10 volumes of information based on his sources. So, in previous videos, I said probably 95 to 99% of what Gibbon presents, which is basically what everybody else since then has used to teach on the Roman Empire and its true history. But I would say it's almost all of it's fabricated, it's speculation. there's not much authenticity in my view of Edward Gibbon's publication on the fall of Rome. And so it's that was the beginning of the little season, in my opinion. This is the early late 18th, early 19th century, when the art of deception really became part of our culture during the season of deception. And so, with that said, looking at Gibbon's 10 volumes on the fall of Rome, now we have 28 volumes of early church father writings, which, go back to that same era. And we have almost 3 times the amount of information from early Christianity. And so I'm like, well, let's look at who are editing these books and when were they published. And so you see the Ante-Nicene Fathers came into circulation prominently in the late 1800s, with the primary editor being Alexander Roberts. And so you start looking at other publications of Alexander Roberts, and one of them is a companion to the Revised Version of the New Testament. Like, what is that all about? The Revised Standard Version of the New Testament was published by Westcott and Hort in the late 19th century, that has kicked off all the modern Bible translations that we see today. And these men distrusted the Holy Bible. They used manuscripts to alter and change it, and they were basically had occult connections, as you see here. But these two men, using a corrupt Greek text, began all the modern Bible translations that we see today. So you start seeing the connections, and with just a little research, you see that the revisers of the New Testament in 1881, you can see here Hort in the middle. You can see here on the bottom right, Westcott. On the bottom left, you have Alexander Roberts, Professor Roberts. So he was part of the committee of changing the Holy Bible. And now he is the primary editor of the Ante-Nicene Fathers. That's very interesting to me. And so, continuing our research, and this is quickly a brief review, just going into the primary talk that we're going to talk about, but Philip Schaff was the primary editor of the Post-Nicene Fathers. And you can see here Philip Schaff, and you can see here him with the hidden hand symbology, just like you see with all Freemasonry here. And, basically with a little research, you see that Philip Schaff was the president of the American Standard Version in the late 19th, going into the early 20th century, had direct relations with Westcott and Hort. And basically, it was the changing of the Holy Bible in the United States with an American Standard Version. And he was part of the editing and writing of the history of the Christian church here. You can see here, discussing the Christian church in the Middle Ages. And, we have the early church father Eusebius with his church history. And that's part of the Ante-Nicene writings. And is implying that the temple, and I think that's why we see it occurred earlier, prior to the second coming of Jesus Christ, during the first century, but it ensured the freedom of the church, established Christianity.
God is shaking these false Babylonian churches and calling you to a real relationship with him. God does not reside in temples made with human hands. I'm just going to show you a few of the videos that I've seen in just the past 2 or 3 days. So I'm sure by now we've all seen this woman who called around to a bunch of different churches, and not many of them would donate 1 can of baby formula. I think she's still going, so I don't know what the current number is, but the last I saw, I'm pretty sure it was like 6 out of the 50-ish churches that she called offered to give her the formula. These churches are raking in the big bucks from their congregation, tax breaks, all of these donations. I'm sure they're getting grants and everything else, and they couldn't help out with a can of formula. And I don't want to hear, oh, like you have to be part of the congregation at that church. That's not what the Bible says. This is not about individual churchgoers. This is about exposing the system.
The church that said that they would only give a can of formula to a starving baby if they went to that church. This is Dr. Matt Brown, the pastor since 2021 at Germantown Baptist Church in Tennessee. If you look up their property record, it's owned by Germantown Baptist Church Incorporated, which isn't weird, but there's all this public information underneath me. When you open up the appraisals, you see this, that the total assessment of the church is $151,000. But the total appraisal of the church is $2.1 million. That is a significant difference. You have to do something to your property for it to be valued more. And since they didn't buy land, they already owned the 65 acres. I looked at their permits. Look at the numbers on these. In 2023 for $175,000. And then in 2024 for $2.4 million. Alteration of front existing altar at Germantown Baptist Church. Platform to be extended out 12 feet forward. $175,000. But let's get into the big one. $2.4 million for what? Well, we don't know. GBC Worship Center repairs and updates to the center at Germantown Baptist Church. 2024, they did $2.4 million in updates, according to their permits. The entire place is valued and appraised at $2.1 million, which is less than the updates that they just put in. And it is all
Ugh. What the hell? Unavailable. Uh-oh. Looks like somebody got canned. Video not available. Oh. Oh, God. You can't watch that video. No, you can't watch that video. That might be telling a little bit too much about the church and the fake church. You can't talk about the fake church on YouTube. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, time deception. We got what? No. Memberships only. Oh, come on. Membership only. That sucks. I'm not gonna. Jesus walked the earth, chained up the devil, and the devil has been released from the pit. Loose timeline deception. Satan's released in our position in the little season. Calculating Satan's release. Okay, let's hear it, bro. What do we got?
Hi, everyone. This is Andy, and I want to welcome you back to our channel. In this video, I wish to present something that has become well known.
Okay, I can't tell. Is it a woman or a man? Sounds like a woman. Could be a man. I don't know.
Known in our community as the timeline deception. And in this video, I will include an ongoing timeline calculation to help us understand exactly where we are in this little season. Now, if you have not yet seen my previous video on the little season time indicators in the New Testament, I recommend watching that one first, so you can fully grasp the foundation of little season eschatology and the place we find ourselves in today, according to the scriptures. Now, before we continue, I first want to answer why we even suspect there is a timeline deception at all. When reading the book of Revelation, with the simplest meaning of its words, it becomes very difficult to reconcile the idea that Satan's loosing would be for a little time if we are also told by the world that we are currently living about 1,000 years after the millennial reign. The Greek phrase used is a literal small or short time, and the Peshitta reads with a similar Aramaic idiom. In other words, any plain reader can reasonably ask how such a little time could stretch into a full millennium beyond the 1,000 years that preceded it. This valid question alone should be enough to cause any believer to pause and re-examine what we have been told about our history and the narrative that we have been given, or better yet, that has been forced upon us. Besides this linguistic point, there are also historical and chronological anomalies we should consider. Secular chronologists and revisionist historians have long noticed duplications, overlaps, and expansions of centuries within the record of history itself. In other words, certain chronological blocks appear to have been artificially lengthened and overlapping events were redated. Researchers, such as Anatoly Fomenko and others, have proposed that the historical record shows clear signs of added centuries. Whether you accept every detail of those claims or not, just by the existence of these critiques alone, we have more than enough reason to re-examine the common record of history, instead of accepting it blindly. Even more intriguing is that many tangible artifacts still exist today, which when viewed through the lens of our research, point to a different dating system than the one we use now. These signs have been before us the entire time, hidden under convenient cover stories that redirect our understanding away from their true origin. Coins and buildings bearing an I or J before the numeric year are a clear example. These marks appear all across Europe and the so-called colonies, engraved on coins, churches, monuments, and city gates. In the modern system, we are told that the I or J simply stands for the number 1, meaning that a date like I-700 should be read as 1700. But when you actually examine these inscriptions closely, that explanation quickly collapses. Many of these I and J characters are clearly not the number 1. Some are stylized, curved, or flared, while others resemble different letter forms entirely. And in several cases, the same coin or building inscription will show both the leading I and a true numeric 1 side by side, such as I-621, proving that the initial mark was never intended as a numeral at all. If that leading mark is not a number but a kingdom prefix, a symbolic Jesus or Jesus, then I-700 no longer means 1700 in the modern sense. It means Jesus 700, the 700th year of his millennial reign. And for example, this book, which shows that it is written in 1642 on the cover, has the actual text within the book say that this book took place in the time frame of the 600s. Once this is understood, the reading of history changes completely. And thus, for example, many dates that look like the 1700s or 1800s in the modern reading, which involve that I or J as a 1, may actually represent the latter centuries of the millennial kingdom, the same period just before Satan's release and the beginning of this little season. And fittingly, the very coins and stones that bear these marks are filled with Christian symbols: radiant suns, lambs, crowns, and crosses, all testifying to a world still living under Christ's reign and not awaiting it. Likewise, the world fairs and the major rebuilds of entire cityscapes appear to me as outward signs of a civilization that already existed and was simply reorganized and rebranded. For time's sake, however, I won't go too deep into the World Fair evidence here. That deserves a full study of its own, but it is worth noting how those events fit the same pattern. When taken together, these linguistic, historical, and physical evidences form a pattern of questions that deserve a thorough scripture-anchored answer. And to begin finding those answers, we must first return to the scriptures, where the pattern of God's very own way of timekeeping is revealed most clearly. As I mentioned before, this video is a continuation of the work begun in the previous study, and what follows here will be presented as both a research model and an invitation to calculate through the timeline deception together as a community. Now, some may find this idea of a timeline deception unsettling, especially if you are hearing it for the first time, and that is completely understandable. Part of the purpose here is to expose how deliberately confusing our understanding of history has been made. But of course, that confusion was part of the enemy's plan to conceal the reality that the millennial reign of Christ already happened. But to those who are already familiar with the timeline deception, I'd like to say that I too am aware of the increasingly popular proposal that Satan's release occurred in 1776. The challenge I find with that idea, however, is that it seems to depend on a hidden meaning behind the celebration of the 4th of July and proposes a 250-year little season based on dividing the 1,000-year reign into 4 equal seasons. Yet, as I have mentioned before, the Greek and Aramaic terms do not carry that same meaning as the English word season. The King James rendering of a little season is drawn from the words that literally mean a short time. It is therefore my conviction that it is far better to work from the original wording and from the Israelite way of counting time rather than a 250-year model built upon a single English translation choice. And so, I saw it fit to create a video of my own on the timeline deception in order to bring in a different thought into the community so it can perhaps help increase efforts to continue the work on the timeline calculation as we slowly reach the end of this little season. Now, before we move into the calculation itself, we need to establish one guiding idea. If the ancient pattern of 6 periods followed by 1 period of rest was intended as a macro scale pattern, then reading history through that same pattern will naturally shift our understanding of where we now stand on God's time clock. And this right here is not a denial of history, but rather it is a reorientation of how we count time, using scripture and ancient Israel's own timekeeping tradition as our foundation. Finally, I understand that many believers out there are cautious about non-canonical sources, and I share that caution. But for the sake of historical context, I believe it is more than reasonable to look at early extra-biblical writings that reflect how ancient Israelite and early Christian communities understood the flow of the ages. These sources are not replacements for scripture, but historical witnesses to how those before us interpreted the unfolding of God's plan. So to calculate where we are now in this little season, we must first understand the complete span of God's prophetic clock, the 7,000-year biblical timeline for the world, revealed through scripture and preserved in ancient interpretation. Like I mentioned before, this model is not an invention of modern thinkers, but it is a restoration of what the earliest believers already understood, that God's entire plan for creation, redemption, and rest unfolds in 7,000 years, just as the week itself unfolds in 7 days. 6 days of labor, 1 day of rest. 6,000 years of man's history under sin, followed by 1,000 years of Christ's reign and rest. Yet his final day of rest was not necessarily a complete 1,000 years in length. As we know, scripture shows that near its end, Satan would be released for a short time, bringing about what the prophets and the apostles refer to as the little time after the 1,000-year reign of Christ. Its existence and distinction from the millennial reign are both plainly shown in Revelation 20. And while its exact purpose I will attempt to address later on, it is enough for now to acknowledge that this short period comes after the 1,000 years are completed. It begins after the 1,000 years are fulfilled, yet it still belongs to that 7th day in the prophetic week pattern, the closing moments of God's final age of rest. If we were to rely only on the King James Bible, we would still grasp the core truth of Christ's return and reign, but we would miss out on so much of the ancient Israelites' understanding that surrounds it. Once we include the broader historical and linguistic context, like the Targums, the Apocrypha, and other early writings that the Israelites themselves preserved, a much clearer picture begins to form. The removal of these texts from later editions of Scripture narrowed the framework, but when they are restored to their place, the 7,000-year pattern stands out in full clarity, and I will cover more about that connection later in this video. The following passages form the foundation for the model under consideration. They are presented here in full so that the pattern of God's timekeeping can be clearly seen through his words and the ancient Aramaic renderings of it. On Telegram, I've expressed how much I value not just the Peshitta, but also the Targums many times. And I also have a series on there where I compare the King James Bible to the Targums in order to show how the King James Bible has purposely left out so much extra context to our favorite stories in the Old Testament. Yet I have also shown how these extra contextual findings are in no way contradicting what is called the canon. And I plan to make a video about that too sometime in the future, but for now, in case you don't know what the Targums are, here's a quick explanation. The Targums are the early Aramaic translations of the Hebrew scriptures, written during the Second Temple period and used in the temples. They preserve the traditional Israelite worldview and understanding of the text before later rabbinical and Greco-Roman influence, and often also include prophetic commentary alongside the translation itself. And with that said, here are some initial key passages to consider regarding this 7,000-year framework, and I invite you to pull out your favorite Bible version and read along. Nevertheless, I will put the King James Version on screen anyway alongside the Targum texts. And the word of the Lord blessed the seventh day, and sanctified it, because in it he rested from all his works which the Lord hath created and ordained. This is the day of the great Sabbath, the day of rest for the world. And the Lord blessed the seventh day, the day of the great Sabbath, that in it he would give rest to his creation. It is a sign between me and the sons of Israel forever. For in the 6 days the Lord created heaven and earth, and in the seventh day he shall complete and perfect the world, and shall give rest to the righteous. 6 days you shall do work, but on the seventh day shall be a Sabbath of rest, a holy convocation before the Lord. It is the Sabbath of the great name of the Lord forever. The Targums revealed that the weekly Sabbath was understood not only as a memorial of creation, but as a prophetic sign pointing to the great Sabbath of the world to come, a 1,000-year rest for the righteous after 6,000 years of labor. And the same principle appears throughout Scripture, because the apostles did write about this very pattern, linking the Lord's timing to his redemptive plan. For 1,000 years, half of the 6 days appointed to man's labor before the great, it is simple once you see it. Because what this timeline calculation tells us is that AM 6570 is actually the 1600s. Now, in the real unstretched timeline, the millennial reign ended at 6570, which equals about 1070 AD. But if a certain someone later added roughly 500 extra years into the record, whether through calendar reform, duplicated civilizations, or rewriting of royal chronologies, every old date would now look 5 centuries later. And 1070 plus 500 equals around 1600. So when we read modern history books that speak of the 1600s, we are actually looking at the same period the Bible would call AM 6570, the moment Satan was loosed and the little season began. That's why the little season, the final 430 years, begins in that public 1600s range and continues to today. And if we count 430 years from around 1600, we land exactly where we are today, the 2020s. That means about 425 years have already passed and roughly 5 remain until the close of the 7,000-year plan. Counting forward from the apparent public record of Satan's release in the early modern era gives us roughly 425 years completed of those 430, leaving only a few prophetic years remaining and bringing the close around the decade of 2030. But we're not done yet. The ancient Israelites measured time from 2 starting points, the sacred year beginning in Nisan, which is spring, and the civil year beginning in Tishri, which is autumn. These are sometimes called the 2 heads of the year, and the scriptures bear witness to this too. This month shall be unto you the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year to you. And in 2 Samuel, it's mentioned as well, at the return of the year, at the time when kings go out to battle. So the 2 heads of the year differ by about half a year, which explains why some ancient chronologies count creation in autumn and others in spring. But it doesn't change the pattern. It simply shifts the boundary days. So if the millennial reign ended at AM 6570 and the little season completes at AM 7000, then by Tishri's reckoning, which is the civil autumn start, the closure lands about autumn 2030. While Nisan's reckoning, which is the sacred spring start, places it in spring 2031. Either way, the difference is only about 6 months, and both align with the final Jubilee cycle. So to tie everything together, I'd like you to remember these 3 layers according to my presentation of the timeline deception. So at number 1, we have the biblical timeline. This would be from 0 to 7,000, which is God's prophetic plan from creation to completion. On number 2, we have the real timeline, which is 1,500 years. And honestly, this isn't really a timeline, but it is the true time span between Christ's birth at AM 5500 and the end of AM 7000. And lastly, number 3, the false timeline, which would be from 0 to 2030 AD, which is the inflated public chronology we use today. And when we compare them side by side, it looks something like this. And that is why the math lands perfectly. We are in 2025 by the public count, and if roughly 5 prophetic years remain in the 430-year little season, then 2025 plus 5 reaches 2030. And according to this model, that's when the 7,000-year cycle closes. And it just so happens to align with the enemy's NWO Agenda 2030, the year chosen for a so-called global reset. Is it just a coincidence, or is it actually a striking parallel with the true boundary on God's prophetic clock? As to the interpretation of this, I leave it up to you. I am simply sharing what I have found in my researching of the timeline deception through the Israelite worldview so far, and I hope this might spark you to reconsider a 1776 release date of Satan. Again, if it seems a little confusing, that's just because it was made to be so. And like I said before, if you still do not grasp it fully, that's okay, and I invite you to rewatch this section as many times as you need. Now that we have placed the end of the millennial reign around AM 6570, which is what the public record calls the 1600s, we can begin to see why so many strange shifts and new beginnings appeared at that exact same time. Whether every date in the record is accurate or not, what matters in my opinion is that an entire wave of change swept across the world right when scripture tells us Satan would be loosed for a little season. And to me, it seems as if the spiritual order of God's kingdom was withdrawn and a new counterfeit order rushed in to fill that void as quick as possible. The calendar reset. The Gregorian reform of 1582 removed 10 days from the public calendar, supposedly to fix the solar year. But what it truly did was fracture time itself. For decades, different nations kept different calendars, causing widespread confusion in record keeping. And in my view, this is the perfect moment to insert a chronological shift, to bend the record of history so future generations could no longer tell which day they lived in according to God's time clock. Heliocentrism. Only a few decades later came the writings of Copernicus and Galileo. Their revolution did not merely change astronomy, it quite literally inverted the very way mankind saw creation. The heavens, once understood as the ordered throne of God above a fixed earth, were recast as an infinite empty space. It was a metaphysical reversal and a spiritual inversion that mirrored the chronological one. The birth of science. By 1660, the Royal Society had been founded, and by 1687, Newton published his Principia Mathematica, and what emerged was a new priesthood of reason, claiming authority over what could be known or believed. This new institution replaced the testimony of Scripture and the witness of the saints with mathematical authority and experiment. Basically, an alternate system of truth. The pattern fits the release of the deceiver, the substitution of divine revelation with human speculation. Money and the power to record history. At the same time, entirely new systems of finance arose. The Bank of Amsterdam and the Dutch VOC created the first international corporations, entities with the power to print, trade, and write history on behalf of empires. Whoever controls the flow of money controls the flow of memory, and it is through these institutions that the new world order of that era began to shape the historical record we inherited. The redefinition of spirits. By the late 1600s, what used to be called possession or spiritual oppression was being redefined as mental illness. The spiritual world was medicalized, and the knowledge of demons and deliverance nearly vanished. As the little season progressed, the unseen realm was explained away, and the material world was crowned as the only reality, paving the way for Big Pharma to have become what it is today. The Bible itself. In 1611, the King James Bible was published, and even though early editions still included the Apocrypha, over the next centuries, those books quietly disappeared from the printings. Marginal notes, calendar reckonings, and cross-references that once preserved Israel's time patterns were dropped, and these editorial changes narrowed the framework through which Christians would read prophecy, making the 7,000-year model almost vanish from memory. The networks of the elite. During the same period, the Jesuit order became the most powerful educational and diplomatic body in Europe, while Freemasonry formed its grand lodges in the 1600s and 1700s. These networks served as the channels through which new ideologies and calendars were normalized, creating a unified narrative of history under the guise of enlightenment and fraternity. The rise of measurement and uniformity. When the world adopted new standardized measures and the metric system, it was anything but progress. But instead, it was more like a declaration of independence from the creator's design. By numbering and weighing creation apart from its maker, man rewrote the language of order itself. The earth became a grid of control, and time was captured within a counterfeit rhythm. The false clock of this little season. Remapping the world. As colonial powers expanded, they collected artifacts, redrew maps, and built the first museums. History was literally cataloged under new rulers. Entire civilizations were renamed, and relics from the Millennial Kingdom were redated to fit the new chronology. Through these acts, the memory of the old world, the kingdom that was buried beneath Enlightenment's curated past. The fall of sacred architecture. At the same time, sacred geometry and symbolic design gave way to functional construction. The cathedrals and starforts of the kingdom era were replaced by structures built for commerce and industry. Energy shifted from aether and resonance to coal and steam. It was more than a change of architecture or technology. It was the visible decline of a world once ordered by divine harmony. The Age of Reason. Philosophers began to exalt human reason as the highest authority, and faith and revelation were treated as superstition. By the 1700s, the church was no longer the steward of time. Science and the state took its place. And just as Revelation foretold, the nations entered a season of deception, forgetting the 1,000 years that had just passed under Christ's rule. And while these changes shaped the structure of the world, new powers quietly rose to manage it. The rise of post-1600s bloodlines. As the world entered the 1600s, the beginning of this little season, new family lines emerged that would carry forward the dominion once held by kings and priests. These were not crowned rulers, but bankers, merchants, and social engineers who built invisible empires upon credit, trade, and debt. By the late 17th and 18th centuries, names such as the Rothschilds, Rockefellers, Morgans, and other banking houses began to appear, forming a network of control that reached beyond nations. Through central banks, state charters, and corporate institutions, they replaced the authority of the altar with the authority of the ledger. Now, these houses are not just families of wealth, but instruments of the enemy's new order, a new priesthood of economics and policy that now governs the nations once ruled by the saints. And their rise fits perfectly within the framework of the little season. It is the time when Satan is loose to deceive the nations once more. The crowns of the old world became symbols of corporations, and the thrones of kings were replaced by the chairs of boardrooms. Power shifted from the sacred to the secular, and from faith to finance. And from that point forward, history itself was written by those who controlled its records. When these realities are viewed through the biblical timeline, their emergence is not random. It is the continuation of the same spiritual rebellion that began when the 1,000 years were fulfilled. And with all these threads put together, the calendar reset, the cosmic inversion, the rewriting of scripture, the rise of corporations and secret orders, the medicalization of spirits, and the erasure of sacred design, they paint a single picture. This is what the world looks like after the 1,000 years are expired, and Satan is loosed for a little time. Even if some of the dates in my current timeline have been stretched or rewritten, the clustering itself cannot be ignored. Every field of life, timekeeping, science, faith, architecture, finance, and language was rewritten in the same window that aligns with the start of this little season, according to the Israelite timeline of the world. Whether these events were consciously engineered or divinely permitted as part of prophecy, the result is the same. The world that followed the Millennial Kingdom became a different world altogether. Now, I'm not saying every detail of this reconstruction is flawless, or that every record from the 1600s can be trusted, but what I'm simply showing is the pattern. The deeper you look, the more you see the shift was spiritual, institutional, and cultural. And as always, I want to remind you to test everything by scripture, to seek the Lord's discernment, and to approach these findings with prayer. This study is not about building
Did you know Washington has a beach that's literally crawling north, growing by nearly 100 feet every year? Or that deep inside Mount Rainier sits the largest volcanic ice cave system on Earth, where lava-heated steam tunnels wind through solid glacier? How about the fact that the tallest waterfall in the continental U.S. isn't in Yosemite? It's in Washington, and you probably couldn't find it even if you tried. Well, the Evergreen State has a lot more to it than just rain, coffee, and national parks. So buckle up, because we're about to hit you with 50 of the strangest, wildest facts about Washington that you probably never knew. Fact 50, the secret volcano under Seattle. You're floating over a volcano, and you don't even know it. Beneath the ferry routes of Puget Sound lies Bainbridge Ridge, an extinct volcano buried under mud and silt. It last erupted tens of millions of years ago, long before humans arrived. Yet scientists only discovered it in the 1990s using seismic imaging. They realized there's an entire volcanic mountain hiding beneath one of America's Did you know Washington has a beach that's literally crawling north, growing by nearly 100 feet every year? Or that deep inside volcanic mountain hiding beneath one of America's busiest waterways? Every morning, thousands of commuters ride directly over a prehistoric inferno, completely unaware. It's Seattle's most explosive secret, a sleeping volcano buried right below the waves. Fact 49, the beach that refuses to stay put. Long Beach Peninsula isn't just long, it's alive. This enormous sand spit, stretching over 25 miles, actually crawls northward by about 100 feet every year. The Columbia River's powerful currents keep feeding it with fresh sediment, forcing the shoreline to expand and reshape itself nonstop. Entire lighthouses have been moved inland to escape being swallowed by new dunes. It's one of the fastest growing coastlines on the planet, a living, moving barrier that constantly redraws Washington's edge. Every grain of sand here is on a slow motion migration north. Fact 48, the waterfall that flows up. At Cape Disappointment, gravity doesn't always win. When strong Pacific storms hammer Washington's coast, 100-mile-per-hour gusts can grab waterfalls midair and blast them straight back up the cliff. The torrent transforms into a ghostly mist that rises instead of falling. Locals call them ghost falls. It's a natural illusion that looks completely impossible. Water defying gravity as wind overpowers the pull of Earth itself. One moment it's waterfall, the next it's a floating cloud in reverse. Fact 47, the lake full of ghost trees. Mount St. Helens didn't just blow apart a volcano. It created a floating graveyard. When the mountain erupted in 1980, the blast ripped up entire forests and hurled them into nearby Spirit Lake. To this day, thousands of tree trunks still drift across the surface like a wooden continent. Beneath the water lies a sunken forest of shattered logs, releasing shimmering methane bubbles that rise like ghostly rain. What's even crazier? Scientists found that microscopic life has evolved here from scratch. Spirit Lake became a natural laboratory for rebirth after destruction. Fact 46, the beach that sings. Some Washington beaches can literally sing. At places like Mocalypse, every step across the sand produces a deep, cello-like hum that vibrates through your feet. The grains are perfectly smooth, round, and clean, rare conditions that make them sound like tiny instruments. Only about 30 beaches on Earth can do this, and Washington has one of them. Walk at just the right pace, and the coastline itself comes alive with sound, a natural song carried by wind and waves. Fact 45, the glacier that moves faster than you can walk. Glaciers are supposed to crawl, not sprint. But on Mount Rainier, the Emmons Glacier sometimes surges forward faster than a human can walk. When meltwater gets trapped under the ice, it acts like grease, turning the whole glacier into a sliding mass of cracking, grinding ice. In a single hour, it can creep forward several feet, an avalanche moving in slow motion. It's the largest glacier in the lower 48, and when it decides to move, there's nothing slow about it. Washington's frozen giant isn't dead. It's breathing, groaning, and occasionally sprinting. Fact 44, the megaquake that's overdue. 70 miles off Washington's coast sits a monster, the Cascadia Subduction Zone. This 700-mile fault is locked tight, storing centuries of tension that will one day unleash a magnitude 9 megaquake. The last time it ruptured, January 26, 1700, the shaking was so massive it sent a tsunami all the way to Japan. Scientists say these events strike every 300 to 600 years. You can do the math. We're already in the danger window. When it finally snaps, the Pacific Northwest won't just shake. It'll drop, flood, and rewrite the coastline in minutes. Fact 43, the tree that survives on air. In the heart of the Hoh rainforest stands a tree that broke the rules of biology. Locals call it the Tree of Life, a giant Sitka spruce suspended over a gaping void. Its roots stretch across open air, clinging to bits of soil on either side, while a hollow cave gapes under it. The earth that once held it up has completely eroded away, yet somehow it still lives. Green, thriving, and photosynthesizing like nothing's wrong. Biologists can't fully explain it. It's as if nature herself refused to let go. A living bridge between life and gravity. Fact 42, the ocean that glows in the dark. On summer nights in the San Juan Islands, the ocean lights up like a galaxy. When the water's disturbed, billions of microscopic plankton called dinoflagellates flash an electric blue-green glow. Every paddle stroke, every fish darting by. It all leaves a trail of light that fades like stardust. Boats carve glowing highways through black water, and swimmers shimmer like ghosts. It's one of the few places in America where you can literally paddle through a sea of stars. Fact 41. The buried canyon beneath Seattle. During the last ice age, a glacier nearly a mile thick buried the region. As it melted, torrents of water carved a massive trench, 600 feet deep, straight through what is now downtown. Over millennia, that canyon filled with mud and gravel, and eventually, a city rose above it. Engineers still trace its outline using seismic data, finding echoes of a vanished river running under modern skyscrapers. Seattle isn't sitting on solid ground. It's perched on the fossil of a flood. Fact 40. The lakes that bleed turquoise. High up on Mount Rainier, lakes like Tipsu and Reflection glow with an almost unnaturally vibrant turquoise color. This isn't due to pollution or algae. It's caused by something called rock flour. As the mountain's massive glaciers grind their way downhill, they crush rock into a fine microscopic powder. This sediment gets suspended in the meltwater and flows into the lakes. When sunlight hits these tiny particles, it scatters the blue and green light wavelengths, giving the water its brilliant milky blue hue. These lakes are basically living thermometers. Their color changes with the amount of glacial melt. Fact 39. The island that's still rising from the sea. Whidbey Island looks calm, but it's literally on the rise. During the last ice age, the crushing weight of a mile-thick glacier pushed it down like a thumb on wet clay. Now that the ice is gone, the land is bouncing back, a process called isostatic rebound. Every year, Whidbey creeps about 2 millimeters higher, enough over centuries to tilt forests, drain wetlands, and birth new beaches. Most coastlines are sinking. This one's resurrecting. It's a quiet, slow-motion miracle, an island that's still standing up after the Ice Age tried to bury it. Fact 38. The river that flows through solid rock. Near Mount Rainier, the Little Natchez River performs a vanishing act. In several spots, the entire river disappears underground, not into the soil, but into tunnels carved by ancient lava. Thousands of years ago, molten rock created hollow tubes inside basalt flows. Today, those tunnels act like plumbing, swallowing the river into a roaring underground channel before it bursts back out downstream. Hike the area, and you can literally hear the river thundering under your feet while standing on solid ground. It's a hidden world where fire and water share the same bedrock. Fact 37. The sleeper volcano that erupts without warning. Everyone watches Rainier and St. Helens, but Washington's real wild card is Glacier Peak. Tucked deep in the North Cascades, it's one of America's most explosive volcanoes, yet barely monitored. Its eruptions have buried valleys in ash, sent debris flows miles long, and spread fallout as it into rock ground. The river performs a vate, the river that flows through solid rock. Near Mount Rainier, the Little Natchez River, not tubes inside basalt, it bursts back out down solid ground. It's a hidden world with warning. Everyone watches same bedrock. Fact 37. The sleeper volcano that erupts without warning. Everyone watches Rainier and St. Helens, but Washington's real wild card is Glacier Peak. Tucked deep in the North Cascades, it's one of America's most explosive volcanoes, yet barely monitored. Its eruptions have buried valleys in ash, sent debris flows miles long, and spread fallout as far as Montana. But because it's so remote, few even know it exists. Scientists call it a sleeper volcano, a quiet giant that's overdue for attention, shouldn't exist. Drive 150 miles east of Seattle and the rainforest vanishes into desert. Eastern Washington sits in a rain shadow, a barren world created by the Cascade Mountains. When Pacific storms hit the peaks, they dump all their rain on the west side. By the time the air crosses over, it's bone dry. Towns near Hanford Reach get barely 6 inches of rain a year, as little as Las Vegas. Sagebrush replaces evergreens, dunes replace moss, and cactus grow where ferns should. It's a desert born not from latitude, but from geology itself. Fact 35. The forest that squeezes rain from thin air. The Hoh rainforest literally drinks the sky. On days when it's not raining, yes, that's a thing in Washington, the forest harvests water straight from the air using a bizarre trick called fog drip. Pacific Ocean fog rolls in, condenses on mossy branches and ancient fir needles, and drips like a hidden faucet onto the forest floor. It's like a forest breathing moisture. Even in the dry season, the Hoh stays soaking wet ecosystems. 15,000 years ago, an ice dam in Montana shattered, unleashing a wall of water 400 feet high that tore through the Northwest at 60 miles an hour. Not once, but dozens of times. The result? A canyon over 4,000 feet deep, carved in days, not millennia. These were floods so massive, they made every river on Earth look like a trickle. What you see today isn't a peaceful valley. It's a war zone of ancient water fossilized in stone. Fact 33. Washington has a volcano chain no one talks about. Everyone knows Mount Rainier, but Washington's volcanic secrets don't stop at Land's Edge. Lurking offshore is a chain of extinct undersea volcanoes stretching 700 miles along the ocean floor. The Cobb-Eichelberg Seamount Chain. These ancient giants rise thousands of feet from the seabed, invisible from the surface, yet teeming with bizarre life that thrives in total darkness of it. Fact 32. The wine empire hiding in California's shadow. Everyone thinks American wine equals California, but Washington is secretly the second biggest wine state in the US, and it's not even close. With more than 1,000 wineries, eastern Washington's dry, sun-blasted valleys grow grapes that win international competitions, often beating California's elite. The volcanic soil, the hot days, the ice-cold nights, it's a perfect recipe. Washington wine is like if Napa stopped bragging and started delivering. While the world chases overpriced bottles from Sonoma, Washington's quietly producing world-class reds and whites. And most people have no clue. Call it humble, call it underrated, just don't sleep on it. Fact 31, Seattle is farther north than half of Canada. Get ready to unlearn geography. Half of Canada lives south of Seattle. Let that sink in. Cities like Toronto, Montreal, and Ottawa, all below Seattle's latitude. So is Quebec. So is Nova Scotia. Seattle sits at 47.6 degrees north, the same latitude as Paris. That means insanely long summer days with sunlight stretching past 9:30 p.m. around the solstice. Basically, if Seattle were in Europe, it'd be northern France, but with better seafood, louder coffee machines, and way more flannel. Geography just broke your brain. Fact 30, home of the giant bizarre-looking clam. Beneath the tidal flats of Puget Sound lives one of the weirdest animals on the planet, the gooey duck. This is the world's largest burrowing clam. They can live for more than 150 years buried deep in the sand. Harvesting one is a ridiculous ordeal that involves high-pressure water jets and digging frantically in the mud. It's a strange, prehistoric-looking creature that has become tried to erase and failed. The Columbia River is one of the most dammed rivers on Earth. It's been chopped into lakes, slowed, redirected, engineered into submission. But there's one stretch the bulldozers couldn't touch, the Hanford Reach. Why? Because it was inside a Cold War nuclear zone so top secret, no one could go near it. That accident of history saved it. Today, it's the last wild, untamed section of the Columbia. 51 miles of raw power, fast water, and one of the few places left where salmon still return to spawn by the tens of thousands. It's not just a river. It's a relic of what the West looked like before we started damming everything that moved. Fact 28, where the ocean eats ships alive. There's a place off the coast of Washington that sailors call cursed. It's the mouth of the Columbia River, a violent collision point between river and ocean that's been nicknamed the Graveyard of the Pacific. Over 2,000 ships have been smashed here since 1792, swallowed by a chaotic mix of 40-foot waves, shifting sandbars, and rip currents that drag vessels to the bottom. It's so deadly that the U.S. Coast Guard trains its elite surf rescue teams here. This isn't a ghost story. It's an active ship graveyard, where the sea still claims boats even with modern navigation. Welcome to the most dangerous river mouth in North America. Fact 27, the coastline that breaks your brain. You think Washington's coast looks small on a map? That's because your brain's been lied to. Thanks to the mind-bending maze of islands, inlets, and glacial-carved bays of Puget Sound, Washington has over 3,000 miles of coastline. That's more than California. If you straightened it out, it would reach from Seattle to New York. This is a coastline built by chaos. Glaciers tore through the land like a blender during the Ice Age, leaving behind the most intricately shredded seascape in the lower 48. It's not obvious until you zoom in. Then it looks like the ocean took a bite out of the map. Fact 26. The U.S. town you can't reach without leaving the country. Point Roberts is a slice of America that got lost. It sits just below the Canadian border, but it's completely cut off from the rest of the U.S. To get there, you have to drive 25 miles through Canada, cross the border twice, and then re-enter American soil. Why? Because a British treaty line from 1846 didn't notice there was a peninsula hanging below it. Now, 1,200 people live in this legal limbo. Kids ride school buses across international borders daily. Packages get rerouted through foreign customs. It's America's weirdest border accident, a town that exists because 19th century cartographers didn't zoom in. Fact 25, Washington feeds the nation one apple at a time. Washington doesn't just grow apples, it floods the country with them. Over 60% of all apples in the US come from here. That's 10 to 12 billion apples a year, enough for every American to hold 35. The secret? A combo of scorching sun, icy mountain water, and volcanic soil that turns Washington's Central Valleys into fruit-growing super zones. From Granny Smith to Honey Crisp to the high-tech lab-bred Cosmic Crisp, odds are the apple in your lunchbox was born in Washington. Fact 24, Washington swings between Sahara and Siberia. You think Washington's weather is chill? Think again. In June 2021, a freak heat dome scorched the state to 120 degrees Fahrenheit, hotter than Las Vegas has ever been. That same state has also recorded a mind-numbing negative 48 degrees Fahrenheit. That's a 168-degree temperature swing in a place known for drizzle and fleece vests. 1 month, it's melting roads. The next, it's flash freezing your eyelashes. Washington's like a climate bipolar simulator. Desert furnace one season, Arctic death trap the next. It's not the mild little coastal state you thought. It's America's hidden meteorological wild card. Fact 23, the rainy state that forgets to rain in summer. Everyone thinks Washington's soaked year-round. But during summer, this place basically forgets how to rain. Western Washington can go 2 months straight with 0 rainfall, turning lush forests into wildfire fuel. And statewide level other twist is that in summer, tracking Sprinkler Watch Act 22. 1 park, 3 ecosystems, 0 lot place. You've got 1 towering glacier rapid battered coast boundary rep. But how? It's rain side, Washington. Its rains are the size lush one of in the Quinault. This ancient behemoth is over 1,000 years old, towers 191 feet high, and has a trunk so wide it would take a dozen people holding hands to circle it. At its base, you feel tiny. The undisputed 4 in 2000, it oozed. Here's the baby is made of salt. It's not its real name. Team against the United States destroyed. God tier, not the poles. Think Canada's 1,140 inches. That happened in 9 schools. Mount Everything, Glacier Peak, Washington's, and the Cascade Islands, and the volcanic side, literally a lava-warmed labyrinth inside. It's part sauna, part freezer. It's 12, so deadly. It's mechanic cars. Of Alaska's got the glacier game locked up. Outside Glacier, Washington, 2,568 feet. Called inheritance. Though, for how long is warms, Washington holds on to an ancient frozen inheritance. Though, for how long is anyone's guess. Fact 10. America's tallest waterfall nobody talks about. Everyone knows Yosemite Falls, but the tallest waterfall in the continental U.S., it's hiding in Washington, and almost no one's heard of it. Deep in the North Cascades, Colonial Creek Falls drops a jaw-dropping 2,568 feet. That's over 140 feet taller than Yosemite. So why isn't it famous? Because it's not one giant plunge. It's 13 cascading steps down a wild, unreachable cliffside. No gift shop, no scenic platform. Just a record-breaking waterfall deep in unspoiled wilderness. It's America's tallest and its most elusive. You can't drive to it, you can't hike to it, but it's there. Fact 9. The night the Earth killed a forest. In 1700, a magnitude 9 earthquake ripped through the Pacific Northwest and did something terrifying. It dropped the coastline by several feet in a matter of seconds. The land sank, salt water rushed in, and an entire forest drowned. Today, those dead cedar trees still stand, ghostly, gray, and lifeless, in a swamp where they once towered green. Locals call it the Ghost Forest, and it's a physical time capsule of the last Cascadia megaquake. The tsunami, a warning, it will happen again. Canyon, but Washington is home to a river gorge that's even deeper. Hell's Canyon, which forms the border with Idaho and Oregon, plunges 7,993 feet from its highest rim to the Snake River below. That's nearly 2,000 feet deeper than the Grand Canyon, carved by the river over millions of years. 7. The day a rhino got volcanoed into a fossil. This might be the most metal fossil carved into solid volcanic rock. Here's what happened. 15 million years ago, a rhino died in a swamp. Then, lava showed up. Thick, oozing basalt flooded the but left behind a hollow lava stone desert. You'll find rainbow-colored logs that used to be a jungle. Ginkgo petrified forest, even ginkgos. 5th, the trees fossilized into stone, molecule by molecule of time. Eastern Washington was born in violence. First, the Ice Age floods blasted it with glacial dust so fine it could be some of the richest farmland on Earth. The Palouse is a paradox, a landscape shaped by chaos, perfected by patience. A desert smashed by water, rebuilt by wind, and now feeding the world. Fact 4. Nature's most bizarre unsolved by a pun. Eastern Washington than it looks. Fact 5. The flood that built a farming paradise. Eastern Washington's Palouse looks soft and serene, all rolling green hills like velvet curtains. But it was born in violence. First, the Ice Age floods blasted the region to bedrock. Then, for thousands of years, the wind painted it back together, layering it with glacial dust so fine it could fill some of the richest farmland on Earth. The Palouse is a paradox, a landscape shaped by chaos, perfected by patience. A desert smashed by water, rebuilt by wind, and now feeding the world. Fact 4. Nature's most bizarre unsolved puzzle. In southern Washington, the ground is covered in thousands of perfectly shaped dirt mounds, up to 7 feet tall, like nature made an earthen egg carton. They're called Mima mounds, and no one knows what caused them. Earthquakes, melting permafrost, giant over them, and it looks like alien code. Scientists have proposed over 30 theories. Melting permafrost, giant gophers from the Pleistocene. Scientists have proposed over 30 theories and still can't agree. The Mima mounds are real, old, and when Washington looked like Mars. Parts of Eastern violent floods and potholes and gravel ripples. NASA literally studied them to figure out how water. It's all just sitting there in Washington, waiting to. During the last ice age, Eastern Washington repeatedly broke through its ice dam, unleashing cataclysmic floods that roared across the state. The flow of these floods was about 10 times the combined flow of every single river on Earth today. Boulders the size of houses, Niagara. Imagine a waterfall 5 times wider than Niagara Falls, and the apocalyptic Missoula flood is 3.5 miles wide and plunged over 400 feet. For a brief, violent period, it was one of the largest waterfalls the world has ever seen. Today, the floodwaters are gone, and you can stand on the edge of the silent, dry cliff, gazing into the peaceful valley where you've never heard.
If you have not already seen the director's cut of Kingdom of Heaven, please go watch it because it is honestly one of my favorite movies of all time. That being said, this specific scene is just absolute cinema. Let's get into it. The first thing that occurs, before either of them even say a word, is a greeting. They wave to each other. Despite the fact that they are enemies, they decide to acknowledge the other. That may not have looked like much, but the fact that they decide to wait for the other to speak first can also be seen as a sign of courtesy.
I pray you pull back your cavalry and leave this matter to me.
Wait, what did Saladin just say?
I pray you pull back your cavalry and leave this matter to me.
Saladin is praying, hoping, politely asking Baldwin to withdraw his army back to Jerusalem. This is not a threat, this is a request. And how does the king of Jerusalem respond?
I pray you retire unharmed to Damascus.
The first two words are repeated, I pray. Baldwin is not only matching Saladin's energy, but he also wishes him a safe return to Damascus.
Reynald of Chatillon will be punished. I swear it. Withdraw, we will all die here.
Here, Baldwin tells Saladin to withdraw, but the words he chooses to use show that he is not making threats. What stands out is not necessarily what Baldwin chooses to say, but instead what he chooses to not say. Baldwin doesn't tell Saladin that if he does not withdraw, he will die here. He is saying that all of us, the hundreds of thousands of Muslim and Christian knights, will die for nothing.
Do we have time?
We have to. I will send you my physicians.
Everyone knows that the king of Jerusalem is a leper, yet Saladin decides to lower his gaze as a sign of empathy, and even go so far as to send Baldwin his very own physicians. And how does Baldwin respond?
Salaam alaikum.
Baldwin decides to thank him by speaking Arabic, the language of Saladin, the language of the Muslim people, and the language of his enemy. And how does Saladin respond?
Alaikum salam.
Saladin answers Baldwin's salam, despite the fact that he is not a Muslim, despite the fact that he is a Christian, despite the fact that he is the enemy. And then we just see Baldwin's sister, Princess Sibylla, just in awe of what she just witnessed. She just watched her brother cause Saladin and his entire army to withdraw, using nothing but words. Now, you're probably thinking, why is this scene the greatest scene in all of cinema? Well, because on the surface, nothing happened. There was no giant epic fight, no big reveal. It was kind of anticlimactic. But if you dig deeper, so much happened. It shows us how to solve a problem. Respect and communication. That's it. If there's anything I missed, please feel free to comment down below, and feel free to check out my other videos. Thanks for watching. If you have not already seen the director's cut of Kingdom of Heaven, please go watch it because it is honestly one of my favorite movies of all time. That being said, this specific scene is just absolute cinema. Let's get into it. The first thing that occurs, before either of them even say a word, is a greeting. They wave to each other. Despite the fact that they are enemies, they decide to acknowledge the other. That may not have looked like much, but the fact that they decide to wait for the other to speak first can also be seen as a sign of courtesy.
I pray you pull back your cavalry and leave this matter to me.
Wait, what did Saladin just say?
I pray you pull back your cavalry and leave this matter to me.
Saladin is praying, hoping, politely asking Baldwin to withdraw his army back to Jerusalem. This is not a threat, this is a request. And how does the king of Jerusalem respond?
I pray you retire unharmed to Damascus.
The first two words are repeated, I pray. Baldwin is not only matching Saladin's energy, but he also wishes him a safe return to Damascus.
Reynald of Chatillon will be punished. I swear it. Withdraw, we will all die here.
Here, Baldwin tells Saladin to withdraw, but the words he chooses to use show that he is not making threats. What stands out is not necessarily what Baldwin chooses to say, but instead what he chooses to not say. Baldwin doesn't tell Saladin that if he does not withdraw, he will die here. He is saying that all of us, the hundreds of thousands of Muslim and Christian knights, will die for nothing.
Do we have terms?
We have terms. I will send you my physicians.
Everyone knows that the king of Jerusalem is a leper, yet Saladin decides to lower his gaze as a sign of empathy, and even goes so far as to send Baldwin his very own physicians. And how does Baldwin respond?
Salam alaikum.
Baldwin decides to thank him by speaking Arabic, the language of Saladin, the language of the Muslim people, and the language of his enemy. And how does Saladin respond?
Alaikum salam.
Saladin answers Baldwin's salam, despite the fact that he is not a Muslim, despite the fact that he is a Christian, despite the fact that he is the enemy. And then we just see Baldwin's sister, Princess Sibylla, just in awe of what she just witnessed. She just watched her brother cause Saladin and his entire army to withdraw, using nothing but words. Now, you're probably thinking, why is this scene the greatest scene in all of cinema? Well, because on the surface, nothing happened. There was no giant epic fight, no big reveal. It was kind of anticlimactic. But if you dig deeper, so much happened. It shows us how to solve a problem. Respect and communication. That's it. If there's anything I missed, please feel free to comment down below, and feel free to check out my other videos. Thanks for watching.
Kingdom of Heaven, Movieverse History. The movie Kingdom of Heaven tells the story of how a simple blacksmith became a hero during the siege of Jerusalem. However, as is often the case with historical Hollywood dramas, reality and fiction tend to blend, mainly for artistic effect and at the cost of historical accuracy. While Ridley Scott offers a fascinating vision of the Crusader era and a cinematic spectacle, it's important to realize that many events and characters are heavily romanticized, altered for dramatic purposes, or entirely fictional. Sit back and join us as we explore the differences between the film Kingdom of Heaven and the actual history, as told by historians. Let's begin with one of the biggest differences between Kingdom of Heaven and historical fact. None other than the film's central character, Balian, the humble blacksmith from a French village. In the film, Balian's wife commits suicide out of grief for their deceased child. In his rage, Balian kills a priest who had taken a necklace from her corpse and ordered her body be burned and decapitated. To atone for his sin and save his soul, Balian sets off for Jerusalem, the one place where he might find redemption. None of this ever happened. The only things the film Balian shares with the historical Balian are his name, fame, and the fact that he defended Jerusalem and later handed it over to Saladin. The real Balian wasn't born in France, but in Ibelin, one of the Crusader fiefdoms in the Kingdom of Jerusalem. He was not the illegitimate son of a knight named Godfrey of Ibelin, but the youngest son of Barisan of Ibelin, with two brothers, Hugh and Baldwin. After the deaths of their father and oldest brother Hugh, the castle of Ibelin passed to Baldwin. Baldwin later chose to rule over Ramla instead and gave Ibelin to Balian, making him his vassal. Balian's wife was not a common woman who took her own life. She was Maria Comnena, a former queen of Jerusalem and widow of King Amalric. No historical sources suggest that Balian needed to seek redemption in Jerusalem, especially since he was already living there. He was known to be deeply religious, attending every mass and religious festival, even while on military campaigns. He once reportedly spent an entire night in spiritual conversation with a bishop. There's also debate over his appearance. In Kingdom of Heaven, Balian is played by 28-year-old Orlando Bloom, who, despite the beard and dark hair, still resembles an elf from The Lord of the Rings more than a Crusader knight. The historical Balian was 44 years old at the time of the 1187 siege of Jerusalem and described as unusually tall, strong, and very hairy. In the movie, Princess Sibylla is married to the French knight Guy of Lusignan, but in an unhappy marriage. She falls in love with Balian and has an affair with him. King Baldwin IV, who also dislikes Guy, devises a plan to have him killed so that Balian could marry Sibylla and become king of Jerusalem. In reality, Balian never had an affair with Sibylla, and since he was married to her stepmother, it would have been nearly impossible. They also didn't have much personal contact, making a romantic spark highly unlikely. The movie's ending, where Sibylla gives up the throne and returns to Europe to live with Balian as simple peasants, feels more like a Disney fairy tale than historical epic, and is completely fictional. In truth, it was Balian's brother who showed romantic interest in Sibylla. Unfortunately for him, Sibylla actually loved Guy. Her first marriage to William Longsword of Montferrat ended tragically when he died a year after the wedding, leaving her pregnant. As her brother King Baldwin IV suffered from leprosy and Sibylla was his heir, he arranged for her a second marriage, to Guy of Lusignan. Guy, being ambitious, persuaded Baldwin to appoint him regent in early 1182. However, after Guy provoked conflict with Saladin and failed to lead successfully during the siege of Kerak in present-day Jordan, Baldwin changed the line of succession, naming Sibylla's son, Baldwin V, as heir over both Sibylla and her sister, Isabella. Baldwin V was crowned co-king in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre on November 20th, 1183. Baldwin IV also tried to annul his sister's marriage to Guy, but Sibylla refused, most likely because she truly loved her husband. When Baldwin IV died in 1885, he had appointed Raymond III, Count of Tripoli, as regent for Baldwin V. The child king died the following year, and Sibylla became the rightful heir. Raymond and his supporters tried to place her sister Isabella on the throne instead, but Sibylla marched with her army to Jerusalem and seized the city. Jerusalem was hers. But before her coronation, she had to promise her supporters she would annul her marriage to Guy and choose a new husband. Sibylla agreed on the condition that she could pick the man herself. And she did exactly that. She divorced Guy, had herself crowned queen, and then married him again, naming him king and outsmarting everyone. After the fall of the Kingdom of Jerusalem, Sibylla pleaded with Saladin to release Guy, who had been captured at the Battle of Hattin in 1887.